Hey guys, Interjection here, and today I have a very, very good game of Age of Empires 3. It is Tit playing as India here versus Sporting Lisbon playing as the Iroquois. And this game is from Group I of PK Clan Tournament 4, and that is a very tough group indeed because it is filled with players who are almost all Lieutenant Colonels, which of course is a very high rank in Age of Empires 3, for those of you who perhaps do not know. There is one Sergeant in that group, and my message to him is good luck to the guy. But yes, this map is clearly Great Plains, as you can see, and we're going to be seeing quite a lot of games played on the Great Plains. In fact, every game in the group stages will be played on Great Plains, and that is because this map is the first map in the map pool. And this map will also be the first map played in every best of 3, 5, 7, whatever best of whatever they are playing. And as we can see here though, Tit using this exploring monk, of course India get 2, he's using one of them to walk around this player's base, and I imagine he is looking for those starting treasures. Of course, there's always those really small treasures like 50 coin or 40 coin or 30 food guided by 1 coyote around each player's base, which they can grab early on. And because Iroquois almost always will build that trading post at the very beginning of the game, that means he will not be collecting up those small starting treasures, meaning that India is free to send his monk over there and perhaps ninja himself an extra 40 coin or 30 food or whatever he can find and prevent that player from getting it himself. Of course, because India build the trading post, that does use up all of their wood, and you might expect, well, how do they build a house? But obviously, for those of you who play Age of Empires 3, we know that the Travois transforms. They start with a Travois, and that will transform into a building of your choice. And the building he has chosen is clearly a house, because that building he needs right away. Of course, he could build it into like a plantation, which of course costs 800 wood, and the house is only 125 wood, but he doesn't need a plantation right now. He has coin mines. There's no point in doing that. He might as well build himself, obviously, a house, which he needs right this moment. And the Indian player, though, has almost all of the resources he needs to put down a wonder, and he hasn't actually collected any wood at all, so he's had a lot of town centre downtime, since the only settlers he's trained are with the wood that he started with, and of course Indian settlers cost wood, for those of you who might be confused. Here, putting down an agrifort near this huntable animal herd here. Of course, he can kind of shoot the herd in the direction of the agrifort for it to be quite a little bit more protected, and of course the agrifort is quite close to his town centre, giving him some cover as well. Of course, he's putting this agrifort down so early because Iroquois, his opponent, has a very, very strong and a very, very fast rush that they can use if they choose to. Now, putting this agrifort down so soon has kind of cost him quite a lot in terms of economy. Of course, that town centre downtime for each second wasted now not training a settler has kind of an exponential curve effect on the resources that he could have had later on in the game if he had been training settlers. So, why would such a good Indian player choose to waste so much downtime early on? And that is because Iroquois have a very scary and a very powerful rush. As you can see here, he's clicking up now with the messenger, and he's almost a quarter aged already, and that is because that particular politician is a unique war chief politician that they can choose for any age up, though they can only use it once, and it gets you there super quick. And the Iroquois, in their town centre, they have a button which they can press, which gives them 5 tomahawks. It costs 500 food, and they can be shipped to a forward spawn point, and that's very nice, of course, if you have a forward war hut. They can also combine that with the first 5 tomahawks that they might train, and they can also ship something like 7 hyena or 6 tomahawks for a very powerful rush. As we can see here, Sporting Lisbon already up to age 2, and the Indian player not even aged yet, just aging just now, just slightly behind him, and obviously he wasted quite a lot of time. That is very significant considering how early he put down that agrifort, now training some sepoys. But back to Sporting Lisbon, and as you can see here, he has been using, obviously the Indian player, these 2 elephants and also this native scout to siege down that war hut whilst it was in construction. And it's taken a very nice chunk of damage there, as you can see by this health bar. And that is because buildings take double damage whilst they are being constructed. But then once it was fully constructed, of course, it's a good idea to get away, because then that building has the ability to shoot back at him. Of course, war huts are essentially the same as a blockhouse, i.e. as in European civilizations. It has a ranged attack and can train units. Here, though, the Iroquois' first shipment, 4 Kanya horsemen chasing down this scout and bring it down, which is nice, because now the Indian player no longer has a scout, though I think, obviously, he could have obviously sent these horsemen straight over here and maybe have killed a settler quite early on the moment they arrived, but chose not to do that. Never mind, but here we see him killing off some grizzly bears, and he's going to grab himself a Carrera de Bois, which is, of course, a French gatherer that collects resources a little bit more quickly than regular gatherers, so getting him a nice economic advantage. And of course he can still use these to raid, and we'll see how many settlers he is able to kill. But his second shipment here, 5 settlers from his home city, and of course not being aggressive at all here, or as aggressive as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. We'll take a look at the Indian player, and of course he was very prepared for that, building this agrifort so soon, meaning that he could get his units out. Here, quite a sizable army already, and if we take a look at the shipments he sent, 5 sepoy was his first shipment. Of course, getting ready for that big button rush, that powerful Iroquois start, but it's not actually being delivered here. Instead, Iroquois going up with, obviously, the 4 Kanya horsemen to get a little bit of raiding in. Are they going to come and kill a settler? I think, though, as you can see here, the town centre has seen these horsemen, so he might not be able to kill some. Here, the Kanya horsemen not actually taking any shots at all. That's quite nice, not losing any HP, and some very good micromanagement, or at least not being retarded and slipping up on your units like I normally would. Here, though, I just noticed 4 settlers being sent, but he quickly deleted it, and obviously if he did send 4 settlers, that's a very nice economic boom, but of course it might make it a little bit difficult to defend. Of course, India still has a decent military capability, and as we can see here, now sending 7 Hyena instead, and Hyena are actually quite strong. They cost nothing but food, just 100 food. They have a ranged attack of 12, which is multiplied by 2 versus heavy infantry, and if we take a look at this army here, it is entirely composed of heavy infantry, and that could propose, there we are, a little bit of a threat to the Indian player, because, of course, Iroquois has been booming, and the units he has, of course, are going to be very good at defending plenty of them here, though not actually managing to kill any settlers with the Kanya horsemen. We'll switch over to the Indian player, though. Now sending 4 sours, because, of course, he knows that he'll have, obviously, his sepoys here are weak to Hyena, and it's nice to mix in 2 different types of units, because just the one type of unit is usually very easy to counter. Of course, sours are quite strong against Hyena. They do 20 hand damage, and they have a 1.5 times multiplier versus them, so they'll actually do 30 damage to the Hyena and only 20 damage to other things. Here, though, being a little bit passive, no all-in aggression just yet, though I do think Tit needs to do something soon, considering that he only has 23 settlers now, and Sporting Lisbon, of course, on 30, already has a market, now putting up a fire pit. Tit can't let this economy keep booming away, though. Of course, he's going to have problems later on down the line if the Iroquois player manages to get ahead of him. And of course, here, to do any significant damage, he's going to need more cavalry. He only has 4 sours, and he's up against 6 tomahawks about to pop from the town centre, and also 3 from the war hut. And it looks like just the Kanyas on their own there are enough to repel the sours. They're not really doing any damage to the Hyena at all, and they're just going to get focused down really quickly. Here, though, using the sepoy to kill some of the tomahawks there, but he's going to have to leave. He's going to have to get out of there, because obviously Hyena, they do good damage against the sepoy. They have a ×2 multiplier. So here, just killing off the last few units, doing hand damage to him, of course, slowing him down and not letting him escape. Maybe he could train sepoy, cavalry from the big fort. Forgive me, I'm not actually sure if the agrifort can train stable units. I presume it can't, because most Indian players do add in a stable. My knowledge of India and Iroquois as civilizations is not quite as good as it is for the European civilizations. Of course, I came from the vanilla Age of Empires 3, and the only reason I'm casting these Asian Dynasties games is because there is a tournament going on, and I am not going to let an opportunity like that slip up. If we take a look at the score though, 90 points to Sporting Lisbon and 80 to Tit, so Sporting Lisbon sporting a 10-point lead, which is kind of nice. Here though, the Indian player adding in a Consulate, and with that, we will see which politician, or rather European nation, he chooses to ally himself with. But before we switch over, Tit has a 30 settler economy and the Indian player on 26. So of course, he is catching up. Indian settlers, obviously training them constantly, and of course he receives one for free each and every time he receives a shipment. That is part of the Indian bonus. And as we can see here, he has obviously had a very military-wise start, 5 sepoy followed by 4 sours, but his next shipment after that was 300 export. And of course, export is a unique Asian resource that you can spend at the consulate here, which he's just put up. And in that consulate, there is a shipment of 3 settlers, because he has allied himself with the Ottoman. Of course, you get different units and different researches with different nations, but 3 settlers costing 300 export. He hasn't used it yet, but obviously sent 300 export, so can do very soon. Almost has the export for that. But first of all, instead has chosen to train 3 Gardiner Hussars, which of course are Ottoman cavalry. They are essentially just Hussars, veteran Hussars. And if you think about it, they are very, very nice because he's spent, well, basically nothing on them. They're for free. They cost 200 resources each, in theory, because that's what a Hussar would cost. So he's literally spawned 600 resources. We cannot forget that these also have the veteran upgrade for free as well. So that's what, like 650, maybe 700 resources mapped into the game for free for him, bringing the score 106 to Sporting Lisbon and 104. He's now sending 5 Rajaputs from his home city, which of course are kind of like pikemen. They are hand infantry that do very good damage to cavalry, though there aren't very many cavalry units here. It is one of the limited home city shipments that India can receive. A fight about to get going here, and there are only a few tomahawks in there. Of course, India has Gurkhas in the back, which do 16 times 2 versus tomahawks, and they'll be using them to bring the tomahawks down, whilst the sepoys obviously do damage probably also to the tomahawks, but then obviously to everything else. The idea is to bring down the tomahawks, which he hasn't done actually, and then the cavalry would be free to kill off the hyena. Here though, the Rajaput arriving, and they are quite nice units, even though they don't really counter what the Iroquois player has here. They still do 18 straight up damage, and they have a decent amount of hit points as well. We'll switch over to player, and as you can see, he's using his fire pit. He's got settlers dancing at it, doing the Gangnam style war dance to increase the hit points, sorry, not the hit points, the attack damage of his units. Of course, the more people dancing to Psy's great music, the more these units will have of attack, if that made sense. Their ranged attack will increase more the more units are dancing. But still not being that effective here. Of course, losing in settler gather time because of that, but it is essentially always worth it. Putting these settlers back onto it because it looks like another fight is about to commence. Here about to pop 5 hyena, and then the fight will truly start to get going. Thing is though, you could hit and run with these units because obviously they are ranged units that have a longer range than the sepoy. They do not have quite the same range as the Gurkha, but they could still try it and hit and run. But the reason they are not doing that is because it's very similar to British longbowmen in a way. Since they have an attack animation here, it means every time you pull them away, they stop doing the animation and then they will not attack. So if you leave them to it, hands-free style, they'll actually do a lot more shots. Whereas units with rifles or muskets just seem to just shoot and don't have an attack animation. Here though, obviously, India really able to push forward quite nicely, but being repelled by the Iroquois, and that is because I think he just doesn't have enough cavalry. He's really lacking cavalry units. And also it doesn't help that the Iroquois sent Iroquois scouting party from the town centre, which costs 500 food and gives you 5 tomahawks. Here though, here's 2 shipments so far that I have not covered. Of course, well actually there's plenty of shipments I haven't covered, but he sent 6 tomahawks, 4 hyena, 7 hyena, 6 hyena, all of these military shipments to gain a military advantage after an economic start. But after that, he's chosen to send Town Destroyer, which increases the War Chief's siege damage by 1,400%. He now has 240 siege damage, so it's not quite as big as it sounds, though it is still very good. And he's also sent High Chief, which increases the attack and hit points of that guy by 50%, though that is the base hit points and base attack. So he's not actually gained 50% of the 1,400% attack damage to his siege attack, but has instead received 50% of the base damage, if that makes sense. So it's not, obviously they don't stack, they're just separate. So his war chief now, here it is, has, well, 500 hit points almost, but it can have 1,000 hit points, and it only has 500 because obviously it is halfway damaged. And it does 240 siege damage. So if he was to siege the town centre or a house or anything, obviously then Tit would want to focus down the Explorer, and obviously that is a very tanky Explorer, and he's going to soak up a lot of damage and leave the other units to do obviously good damage. They have much less hit points, and obviously those are the ones that won't be being attacked. Of course, the Explorer there kind of acting like a sponge, though I'm not sure if it's a great idea. Of course, he could have sent 4 settlers, and that is a much more boomy shipment. And then if you think about it, the economic kind of advantage that would give him later on would then perhaps outweigh what the Explorer can do. Perhaps if he attacks right now, and obviously attacks kind of sooner rather than later, of course this kind of shorter term hit points increase spongy tanky bastard man will kind of pay off more than the settlers. I don't know, it's a tough one for me to call. Of course both of these players are much better than me, so I can't really critique on them too much. Here though, sending conservative tactics, which increases the Tomahawk and Aina and various other Iroquois units attack and hit points as well, I believe. So clearly it is looking to attack soon. Here though, Tit doing some good damage against the Iroquois economy, taking out those settlers there, and we see the French won, you coward! Surrender. No, I'm joking. Actually, I'm quite aware that a lot of my viewers are French, and I've probably just lost all of them. Oh, shit, I am terrible at being... Anyway, Sporting Lisbon, no, I mean Tit, here he is. We're looking at Tit now, the Indian player, and clearly adding in a lot of cavalry. This is what we need to see, but obviously Sporting Lisbon responding by adding in plenty of Tomahawks. It might be a little bit difficult for some people to tell the difference here, because I certainly can't, and I think playing against Iroquois, you have to do it a few times before you can notice the difference between the two units. Of course, though, those Tomahawks doing very good damage against, obviously, the Sours. Sours are quite weak units. They have very low hit points, and they are only good against Aina because, of course, they have a multiplier which makes them do less damage against Tomahawks. If we take a look at, obviously, the home city shipments he sent Desert Terror, which generally increases the bonus damage of all units that he has, or various Indian units, against what they are good against. So the Sour actually, it did do 1.5 times multiplier against Aina, and now does a 2 times multiplier. But here it looks like struggling a little bit, obviously losing all of those Sours, the stable going down, of course that Explorer there having very, very high siege, and only the Gurkhas in the back. Of course these things, I think he's taking a little bit too much damage with them. Of course they do outrange the Aina, and with them he can get back and shoot and get back and shoot. Here they're calling some Minutemen, and you might think, how did he get those? Because India cannot send Minutemen. They have to go with the Ottoman allies here at the Consulate in order to get Minutemen, actually losing all of those Gurkhas, and really I think he could have saved a lot more of them than he did. About to train 5 more. Perhaps he will be a little bit more conservative with these ones and not lose them, but shipping 10 Tiger Claws from his home city, and this is why my voice is still a relatively normal pitch, because I'm totally convinced that he will be able to deal with this. Of course, if you've played RuneScape, you all know how ridiculous the Dragon Claws were up until they introduced the EOC, but here, obviously, we've got these D-Claw specs absolutely everywhere, messing these units up. Of course, Tiger Claws have a ×2 multiplier against, obviously, these, well, against Aina, but still plenty of hit points and doing good damage to these Tomahawks as well. The Tiger Claws are actually native units that can be trained at an Asian native post. I am not sure which one, because, as I say, I'm from vanilla and my knowledge of the Asian dynasties is less. But they are actually cavalry-like units. They're actually abstract infantry, which, of course, when the Aztec were introduced to this game with the War Chiefs expansion, the Coyote Runner was a unit that functioned like a cavalry unit, because, of course, as in Age of Empires 2 and as in real life, the Aztecs don't have horses, so they needed a kind of a cavalry-like unit, and with the Asian dynasties, the Tiger Claw is also a similar abstract unit that functions as a cavalry unit. So here we see using the Ottoman all up, and I don't know if he sent the settlers from obviously the Ottoman Consulate. He certainly sent Minutemen and used various other things at it. Now burning the relations here, and that means he can pick new relations with a new European ally. He also has foreign logging on the way, which is quite a nice shipment. Of course, India do not get settler shipments, but you might as well consider it similar to one, because of course a 2.35 wood per second trickle is very nice, especially when Indian settlers do cost wood. Anyway, we will see which European ally he chooses to ally himself with next. But here, the, what's his name, Sporting Lisbon, coming in with, obviously, the tanky bastard man, and who does good damage against this, obviously, town centre. And it doesn't look like Tit is going to focus down the Explorer. Of course, killing off the Tomahawks and killing off the Aina is definitely more cost effective, since obviously this has so much hit points. But because of that, looks like he's gonna lose this town center. It's very low hit points. Obviously losing units now quickly because he's not choosing to leave. He's still focusing down that town center, like convinced he's gonna kill it. And in terms of cost efficiency, it is sometimes questionable whether sieging a building is worth it, because if you think about it, these Tomahawks are worth 100 resources each. He must have lost at least 6. That's 600 resources, and of course the town centre is worth 600 resources, so general tip, generally speaking, never focus down a building when there are enemy units that are attacking you. Here though, obviously has enough wood to build that town centre straight back up, but still 600 wood gone, not too bad at all, I suppose. Anyway, Sporting Lisbon, Tit has sent the European allies now. European allies? The British allies. And the British, they give every unit, their passive bonus is that all of the Indian units will now have 10% more hit points. And he also has other various upgrades he can send, such as, I think, 6 Redcoat Musketeers for something like 400 export. If we open up Google here, you can see that if I open up the Consulate guide, generally speaking, everything on the Heavy Games forum is complete shit, and none of it is useful, but the things that are undisputable, like the amount of export stuff costs, are actually quite useful. As you can see here, surgeons, spies, petards. Well, anyway, there's musketeers there, and also a plus 10% land unit hit points. He could have also gone with the French, which give a plus 5% villager gather rates. Anyway, back to this game, and since no one has secured a clear-cut advantage as of yet, and bearing in mind that many games in Age of Empires 3 can be concluded by the 20-minute mark, which is what we are up to now, I think it is a good idea to take a look at these players objectively, see where they are in the game, what their economies are doing, and what they could do, where they could go, where they could take this. We can see the Indian player has a 39 settler economy. And he also has, obviously, distributivism. He also has foreign logging, which is a sizable amount of wood coming in. And although it's not really relevant, he sent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 home city shipments. And of course, India receive a free settler each and every time they receive a shipment. So that's 9 settlers for free. Of course, that's not too bad, really. Anyway, over here we see, obviously, the tanky man taking cannonballs to the stomach. And he's sieging down this Agra fort, not doing a bad job at all. And of course, the Indian player is going to respond to that with his army. Anyway, we'll switch over to Sporting Lisbon, and we see he has a 43 settler economy, which isn't bad at all. Yes, he has more settlers than the Indian player, but it's not enough. They're very similar here. Now, obviously, moving the tanky man away, and yes, doesn't want to lose him. But yes, he has obviously. He's now sending exotic hardwoods, but he doesn't have the spice trade, which of course European civilizations do have and sometimes send, which obviously increases settler gather rates by 20%. I don't think it's a case that Iroquois do not have spice trade, I just don't think he has it in his deck, because Iroquois Age 2, they like to be very aggressive. And here, bringing down that house, of course, this guy does have very high siege damage. Anyway, we also have to remember that the Iroquois do not have steel traps at their market, meaning, of course, they kind of tail off later on in the game. They don't have those economic upgrades, and it makes other civilizations kind of stronger than them the later the game goes on. Here, though, it looks like the Indian player coming in to siege down this war hut, and I think the Iroquois player is just going to give it to him, doesn't have the military to kind of defend that. Of course, Gurkhas are obviously Age 2 skirmishers, and that makes, having Fortress Age units this early on kind of makes it difficult to deal with, especially if you're not in the Fortress Age yourself. Here it looks like the Indian player is now coming in. He has a few cavalry in there, but obviously skirmishers, much like the Aina, are weak to cavalry, so he does need a few. Training some now, also getting his explorer back by putting all of the settlers on the fire pit over here, which he's deleted from here and rebuilt over here. I imagine he's done that because obviously if he was being sieged in his base, then the settlers on the fire pit would be vulnerable, and then they would not be able to do the various dances, such as increasing attack of the units, and also there's one that spawns warriors, which are similar to kind of Minutemen. They lose hit points over time. And of course, having the fire pit over here means that he can kind of spawn that. At the moment, has all 25 settlers. That is the maximum you can have on it, and doing 27% extra damage. Here, the cavalry coming in around the side, trying to get to the Gurkha, but obviously there's a lot of pathing issues there with those trees in the way. It's a nice place to fight for the Indian player, and it looks like they're taking quite a lot of damage, obviously from the sepoy, which do 15 times 3 versus cavalry. We'll switch over to Tit, and we can see that he has sent, he hasn't sent it yet, Dravdan Martial Arts, which increases the hand attack of all units by 15%. I was going to say that these have been upgraded, but they haven't just yet, and obviously if they had, that would make them more effective. But here, it looks like, obviously the cavalry didn't do such a great job, but I think, of course, since these have such highly increased attack from the fire pit, they're not doing a bad job at all. We have to remember that that guy has a lot of hit points as well, and India knows it. He's not going to continue to fight. But during that entire time, though, he has lost a lot of settler gather time. You see these settlers now getting back to getting back to work. The Indian player now sending Imperial Bureaucracy, which is similar to the, what was it? I want to say Liberal Democrats, but that's just a British government political party. But Civil Servants, that's the upgrade I'm looking for. This one is the second version of it, the Age 2 upgrade, and it increases, obviously, all of the gather rates of all gatherers for India by 10% on every resource. It costs 150 of each resource, and I'm tempted to say that that upgrade is a little bit late and that he should have sent it sooner. Of course, that would have been nice, since obviously then it would be helping him out much earlier on, and this game is obviously getting quite late, so that upgrade only come into effect now. But then again, it is sometimes quite difficult to think about market upgrades and economic upgrades whilst you are being sieged. Of course, we saw the Iroquois player pressuring him quite heavier earlier on. But yes, now sending, what is it called, Dravdan Martial Arts, which of course I mentioned over here when he was using his sepoys to do damage against the Kanya horsemen, and of course he hadn't actually sent it, but now he has, and that increases the hand attack of all of his units by 15%. Obviously quite nice. Here's some Kanya horsemen. Of course, even late into the game, it's nice to do some raiding. And this is why players will put outposts up and do the impressive castle drop, because it defends your settlers here. Not losing any settlers, though. As you can see there, 3 settlers actually weren't able to get garrisoned in, so he could have killed those off, absolutely no problem. Here, though, managing to kill a settler down there. And the problem with these late colonial wars is that, of course, they are very long, drawn out, but hopefully very entertaining. Of course, at this stage in the game, there's not really too much going on, aside from the raiding. India, though, obviously their economy is very powerful now, considering all of the settlers and the trickles and the upgrades, etc. And I think, as I said earlier, the Iroquois player is going to just tail off the longer this goes on, and that is the issue with the Iroquois. Of course, they are very, very strong early on, though, and that is where the Iroquois like to win. This game is not over yet, though, because, well, a lot of you leave when I look at my audience retention stats. As soon as I say, oh yeah, this player's winning, you'll fuck off somewhere, and I don't know, well, I guess that I can see why. You now know who's going to win. But, okay, fine, you can leave. You know who's going to win now. But we'll take a look at the Indian player's deck, in which we can see here no more Age 2 shipments, and that is because he has ran out, obviously. Players do like to go up to the Fortress Age because, obviously, they get more shipments then, and also going up to the Fortress Age, not only for shipments, but players like to do that because you get those kind of upgrades. Once you have an army this kind of size, the veteran upgrades, which increase unit attack and hit points by 20%, suddenly become very worthwhile. Of course, arsenal upgrades are nice too, though in Age of Empires 3, you build the arsenal in Age 3, that is when it becomes available. You have to go to the Fortress Age, but you don't see those military upgrades from it as early on as you might in Age of Empires 2, because they're not actually as influential. They don't give you as much benefit for their cost. They are very expensive. but of course this long into the game, especially when they have nice economies, it does kind of come worthwhile. We'll switch over to Sporting Lisbon, this player here. And it looks like these settlers not in a good position. Of course, this is the only hunt left on the map, and Iroquois really do not like farming because, of course, they don't collect food very quickly from farms at all. They're huntable animals. In fact, they don't collect very much from them either. Certainly faster than mills, but because they lack steel traps, it does become an issue here. Losing a lot of settlers, and that is not good at all. Even if he did stand a chance, this is severely reducing it, and if he is going to win the game now, he really has to go all in, because his economy is just going to drop, and as that, I imagine, is why we see these units now coming in. Of course, he has a lot of wood and coin, which he can't really use, and that is because he's been collecting those resources since what else is there to collect? There's no more food. Here, sieging down that castle, but the military units are arriving, and as I said earlier, there's no point sieging a building if there's military units there. It's not good that he has to fight outside of this castle, but this game is not over yet. Here he goes for the last effort here. He has all of these settlers on here, 24 settlers, increasing the attack of these units here by 26%, which is very nice indeed. As you can see, he's absolutely tearing through these units here. Not bad at all, but of course we see more musketeers on the way from the Consulate. There's also more sepoy on the way joining the fight. And of course, we'll switch over to Tit. He also has obviously a Zambarak in queue there. He's just popped some now. And I think that despite that last effort here, obviously, India's economy is just able to replace these units very, very quickly. As you can see here, actually now sending the food silos and starting to transition onto rice paddies, and definitely in a much better position to switch to milling than the other player, of course, Sporting Lisbon. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, remember to give it a good thumbs up down below. That's always appreciated. And also, type GG into the comments section below. One day I won't have to remind you to do that, you know. Anyway, next game will probably be CM Blue Jays versus Victor Swee. Not sure though, I might do another game from Group I. I'll just see what happens. Of course, whilst I'm not casting, someone might post an even better game and I'll cast that one. And when we get onto the group stages though, sorry, when we get out of the group stages, I will then definitely be casting, well, I'll try every single game in the knockout stages, but that is definitely a lot easier to say than it is to do, so please don't hold me to my word, though I will try my best. And I have taken into account the top comments on my previous video, and this is my first attempt at taking that into account. Hopefully it's alright. I will see you next time.